So anyway, this morning, I'm up here to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning, Jamie Flinchball. And just talking with Jamie, and it's been a while since we've had him at some of our events. He was at the first couple Lean Accounting Summits, the first Lean Product and Process Development Exchange, the first Lean HR Summit. Thought, we got to get away from these first things because we're doing other things. So finally we have him here, so we're thrilled about that. And he's going to bring a powerful message to you, and you'll enjoy it. But a little bit about Jamie. Jamie's a very busy guy. As a Lean author, speaker, and advisor, advising companies such as Intel, Harley-Davidson, Crayola, BMW, Amazon, and others. He's also the co-founder of the Lean Learning Center, and also the author of the book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to Lean, which I thoroughly enjoyed because it's certainly a different take and style in reading that. So it was very enjoyable to read, as well as a lot of excellent learning. He also shares his experience as a contributing editor for Industry Week and also a blogger at jamieflinchball.com. So with that, please welcome Jamie Flinchball.
Good morning. Okay, I know you had a long night last night, but we can do better than that. Good morning. Good morning. Much better. So if you'll indulge me just for a moment, as Jim mentioned, we've kind of had a long relationship where I've gotten to be part of many of the first sessions and a few after for programs they've done. And so these are great opportunities to build the community, build relationships, advance the knowledge, learn from each other. And so I think there's few organizations that I think have been more committed to advancing and building the Lean community than what the work Lean Frontiers has done. So thought maybe you could join me, just a thanks for our host, Lean Frontiers, and just a little round of applause for all their hard work. So I'm glad to be here again. I got to do the first Lean for HR Summit, and it was my first time making it to the TWI Summit. Great opportunity to combine them together. Now, I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to avoid using PowerPoint. I don't have a lot of hobbies. One of my hobbies is trying to kill PowerPoint. Not a very exciting hobby, but it is something I'm fairly passionate about, and I go to sometimes great lengths to avoid it. So I'll bear with me. I'll probably misspell some words and probably some penmanship you won't be able to read, but we'll have a little whiteboard here as we go. Now, the topic here is really around coaching, and the topic is just meant to be a little bit intriguing, is coaching Lean or Lean coaching. So we spend a lot of time coaching people on Lean, but that's one aspect of it, coaching people on a topic. The other is, how do we really insert Lean thinking into coaching itself? So how many of you aspire to coach people once in a while? Right? We all do, and we all think we try to, and a lot of times we do what I call drive-by coaching, is we have a conversation, we gave people some advice, and we say, there I go, I just did some coaching. And so I hope to leave you with a different idea. Is I'm not going to talk, as my habit is, about the tools of coaching. There's plenty of opportunities to learn them. They're important. I'm more going to talk about the relationship, the mindset of the coach, and how the coach works with the people that they're coaching. What does that relationship really look like? And so that's going to be the focus of our talk today. So a little honesty test here. Yesterday we handed out a little pre-reading. I may be the first keynote to ever do a pre-work assignment. But show of hands, how many of you read the pre-work last night? Okay. This is why I call it an experiment. So I told them I need 3 plans when I come up here. One if almost nobody reads it, one if everybody reads it, and one if it's somewhere in the middle. So we'll call that almost nobody. And like I said, it's an experiment. I plan to study adjust all the time myself, and that'll be one of them. So the intent behind it, and there's more copies of it. It's a case study called Learning to Lead at Toyota, and it's about one of my good friends, a guy I used to work with, who came into Toyota and had a very, very different experience. And I'll talk about some of the little nuggets, but I'll try to explain the stories since I can't just refer to them, and you all know what I'm talking about. But if you don't have a copy, I at least encourage you to grab a copy if you haven't and make sure you read it. So I have a couple coaching experiences in my life. I've had many, and I want to share a couple of them from both sides to really emphasize some of the key missing points that we get around coaching. So early on in my career as being a lean guy, I got the opportunity to spend a lot of time with a guy named Mr. Iwata. He was the founder of Shingijutsu, and many of you are probably familiar with them. He's since passed away, but he came to us when I was at Chrysler, and like a lot of his colleagues, was pretty gruff, pretty rough, pretty hard on folks, and a lot of the factory managers and VPs just didn't really want to spend a lot of time. Well, we had already paid for him, so I grabbed every ounce I could. So I got to spend months and months and months working with him. So he spent some time in my organization working with me to transform one area that seemed large at the time, but was 120 people. And we went for several months getting dramatic results with these 120 people. And when we were done with this little experiment of making this transformation, I asked him a question. I said, okay, but I've got 5,000. What do I do with 5,000? And he said, that's your problem. And at the time, I was very disappointed with that answer. And at the end, as I looked on it in years past, he didn't want to give me the answer. Now, partly, as I learned in subsequent conversations, he didn't really have the answer. And that was one of the reasons he didn't give me the answer. But the other is that he wanted me to go figure that out for myself. That was the intent behind his answer, is that I needed self-discovery. I needed self-directed learning. And we put almost too much emphasis on the role of the coach, when the greatest coaches help the person go on a path of self-discovery. And so what I'll share with you as I talk about a couple of the examples throughout this morning is that the coach is not, the work the coach does, the most important work the coach does is not the work when the coach is in the room. It's the work that happens after they leave the room. That's what the coach sets up. That's what the coach enables, is they help a person, give them some direction, give them some guardrails, give them some methodology to go on a path of self-discovery, because that, at the end, is the most valuable learning. Now, the other example I want to share is a story when I was on the other side of the table. And really shows, for me, the idea that coaching is about a relationship. Coaching is not a short-term fix for anything. Coaching has got to be a long-term view. So there's a lot of times when we have a short-term need. And my example is when I tried to do coaching when I shouldn't have. I was on the board of a company. I joined it in the middle of a crisis. They were under a forbearance agreement with a bank, and I came on, ended up as the compensation chair and restructuring chair. And we had an issue with the CEO, where he had some behavioral issues that was really sort of destroying the team. We said, all right, well, we need to spend some time coaching him and sending him in a new direction. Well, we had very little time. We had months before the company was completely out of cash, and the bank just decided to pull the plug and sell the assets. And so it was an absolute mistake to even bother trying to coach, because we didn't have an opportunity to go on the long-term approach. The failure in coaching happened in the years that preceded it. And I actually don't blame the CEO, because he was stuck in this role and nobody ever developed him. He came out of school, he got a job, he got one experience, he came into this company, they made him CEO based on his resume, and off he ran. No one ever developed him. Well, I couldn't develop him in 2 months. No coach is going to change the CEO's behavior that fast. And so it ended up in failure. I had to end up firing the guy, and then we brought somebody else in that was better able to lead. And the point is that we have to be very careful about when we choose to coach. We have to understand the circumstances. We have to know the situation. If you're in a burning building and somebody says, how do I get out? You don't say, well, how could you go gather some more data and test your hypothesis? Right? You grab them by the arm and you pull them out a door. So there's a time and a place for coaching, and you have to be in a circumstance where you can take a long-term view, because that's the only way you can go on the path, go on the journey with the coach itself. Now, what I wanted you to learn out of the case study, which I encourage you to learn, is that the subject matter of this case study had a very profound change. We have a before, and we have an after. So forgive the penmanship as we go. So before this person joined the organization, if you start to look, and you'll read this in the case study if you do have a chance to read it, is that his view of what his role was not about being a coach. He was going to come in and be a teacher. He was a knower. And he was going to tweak his knowledge and make some adjustments. He's going to come in at Toyota, learn a few additional things, take his knowledge, and then go teach everybody else how to do it. That's what he was going to do. Now, what he went through was a multi-month experience where and I'll share some nuggets out of this experience as we go, but at the end of this experience, as he came into the organization, he had a very different view. He was no longer a teacher. He was meant to be a coach. He was meant to be a learner. And he wasn't just going to tweak his knowledge, he was going to be an enabler. That was going to be his role. Now, we talk about how do you change someone's viewpoints. These are pretty deeply held views. You don't determine your view of who you are as a leader overnight. You don't sit down and have one conversation and say, oh, this is who I am as a person. This is who I am as a leader. These are deeply held beliefs developed over a long period of time. But this is a pretty dramatic transformation for anybody to go through. And he went through it in a period of months. So how does that happen? Well, the fact is that when we start to look at where our beliefs come from, is that our beliefs come from our experiences. So his old beliefs of who he was a leader came from his past experiences. The schools he went to, the roles he was put in, the praise that was lavished upon him, and that drove one set of views, one set of beliefs. And now he had a different set of experiences that drove a very different set of beliefs. And so the key point I want to drive is that the coach is not about the coaching conversation. And I'll talk about the coaching conversation. The main role of the coach is to create experiences for the person they're coaching. Because that's how we learn. Conversations are just one form of experience. And you can all remember very powerful conversations you've had. But those have been one experiences. The things you've been through, the things that have happened to you, the things you've done, those shape your beliefs. And coaching is about shaping behavior, shaping beliefs, shaping the way we think. That's how we develop an individual for the long term. So our role as a coach, first and foremost, is to give people new experiences. And those new experiences have to outweigh the old ones. Our old beliefs, based on our old experiences. We want to create new beliefs, we need to create new experiences that outweigh the old beliefs. They either have to be more frequent or they have to be more powerful. It's the only way we create a new set of beliefs. So what I want to do is start to share some of the way we create these experiences for people, and what we need to think about as a coach around the shaping of those experiences. And I'll share some of my examples as well as some from the case. So the first one that I want to talk about is eliminating fear and comfort. Both are enemies of learning. So what happens is if we're in our comfort zone, we all have a comfort zone. If we get into our comfort zone, learning doesn't occur there. When we get really far outside our comfort zone, we start to see fear. And we don't learn much under fear as well. In fact, much of the corporate language around creating a burning platform is designed around creating fear. Oh, change or die. And scientific evidence has proven, or at least empirical evidence has proven time and time again, that actually doesn't work. And here's some really pointed empirical evidence behind that. So if you go into the hospital, God forbid, for a heart-related event, bypass surgery, heart attack, something like that, the message is literally change or die. It's not a figurative corporate slogan. It's change or die. 90% of people do not change their behaviors. I got a clear message for fear. Change or die. 90% of people have no change in behaviors. Continue to smoke, eat, whatever it is that's driving the outcomes. Now, in other research, we found that when you focus on the positives of what you're trying to create, more energy, do things you couldn't do before, enjoy the day, sleep better, all these other things that come with changing those behaviors. Instead of a 10% adoption rate of behavior change, they got a 60% adoption rate. Fear does not drive behavior change. Fear drives seeking the comfort zone. We go back to what we know. So we have to go in between for learning to occur. And that's the coach's job, to get somebody in that zone. Get them out of the comfort zone and get them away from fear. So we have to push out this fear boundary by providing some safety for people, and we have to shrink that comfort zone to get people out of it. So a couple examples from the case study, just as an example. The very first thing that you'll find that when my friend joined Toyota, he was being hired to go run a factory. And he was going to come in, and you can all imagine if you're going in for your first day and you're going to go run a site, what you think your first day would be, and you'd have your expectations. I'm going to go get a tour, I'm going to review some of the performance, I'm going to get to meet all my staff, and those are my expectations. Well, instead, the very first thing that happens is they meet him at the door and say, sorry, you're not going into your plant. We're going to go over to another site, and we're going to give you one little line. And we're going to expect you to work with this team and dramatically change its performance. Now, this was right out of the gate, literally walking in the front door, taking him out of his comfort zone. Now, I'm starting to get into the mood for learning. Right? I'm not expecting, I had a plan, I knew what I was going in for. It was pretty easy to go do the meet and greet. It was pretty easy to go and review the performance. It's pretty easy to go on a plant tour. And all of a sudden, it's not easy anymore. Whatever my day was is now going to be different. And so we have to force people out of the comfort zone. There's many, many ways to do this. Of course, we can wait for our customers or our competition to shrink the comfort zone for us. That's the least desirable way. But we can find ways to create opportunities to shrink the comfort zone for the people that we're trying to develop. One of my favorites is really just start to look at our work in a different way. So those of you that are in the TWI track, you've probably heard this in different words many, many times, is just by examining the work through a different lens, we get out of the comfort zone. We see things we've never seen before. And let's just go look at the work and examine it in a different way. All of a sudden, things start to emerge dramatically. Working with a product development team, we had we're developing aircraft engines. So you develop an aircraft engine, you have a product plan that's going to work for a couple of years. So you start to build your project plan, and you have 1 week, 3 weeks for this, 7 weeks for that, 4 weeks for that, and you plan your time out in weeks. Without changing any of the goalposts, all we did was ask people to plan their time and report their time in days. So don't say 2 weeks anymore. Give me that in days. What's 2 weeks mean? Is that 10 days? Is that 14 days? Is that 4 days plus a really big buffer? What do you mean? Now, don't give me the 2 weeks. Give me the days and report it in days. Now, without moving any of the goalposts, we didn't say just develop the engine in half the time. Milestones are still the milestones, but we want you to plan your work and report your work differently. Try this for yourself. Plan your day out in minutes. And then record it in minutes and see what you learn. It'll be pretty uncomfortable, and you'll probably learn some things as well. We also have to take care of the fear zone. What they were asking this person to do in this case study was to go exhibit different behaviors. Go try something new. Go expose yourself. Go try things that you might fail at. Now, if you go in and you have a new team that you're expecting to earn their respect on the first day, are you ready to try new things that you haven't tried before? You're going to go to what you know. You're going to go to your strengths. It's a very uncomfortable environment for learning. That's exactly why they took him to a site other than the one he was trying to learn or trying to run. Because it's safe. I don't have to go and experiment and try new things and fail in front of the team I'm about to lead. Let me go fail over here where nobody even knows who I am. It's a great opportunity. So our job as a coach is to create opportunities where someone can fail without consequences, or at least minimize the consequences, whatever they might be. Because it's the only way we're going to try things different than what we might otherwise try. So create opportunities for people to fail. because we have to, those are one of those powerful experiences that helps our learning. So, the coach's job, eliminate the fear and eliminate the comfort. It's the only way we create experiences where learning actually occurs. Now, as part of this, we start to look at the roles that we have. Now, the time-tested pattern for learning, and we've all learned this, whether you call it plan, do, check, act, or plan, do, study, adjust, and I've taken to start to use plan, do, study, adjust, just because I think study is more attuned to what we're actually doing. The whole point of the study point is to learn what really happened, to examine it. And so the check is nice, but what I actually see people do is check is project management check. Did you do the task you were going to do? That's project management check. Study is, did you get the result you were supposed to get, and why? That's study. So it's just, I don't care what language you use, but we have to get the behavior right anyway. So what you notice in this, again, in the case study that some of you read, is that the coach, a guy named Takahashi, every week had 2 plan, do, study, adjust cycles. One for the coach and one for the coachee. So every Monday, he would sit down with his coachee, and the coachee would present his plan. Let's make sure you have a plan for improvement for the week. You're going to go improve this area. What's your plan for this week? How are you going to approach it? How are you going to examine? How are you going to go after the improvements you need to go? Then he would go and actually do the work. So the coachee would have the plan, go and do the work throughout the week, and then on Friday, together, they would examine the results. Didn't quite work, but on Friday they would examine the results. Okay, did you get what you thought you were doing? How did your plan work? What worked, what didn't work? How did things happen? What surprises happened? They had the conversation that allowed him to learn from the do experience. We don't learn as much from the do. We learn from the study. And then, over the work weekend, the person would make some adjustments and come back the next Monday with a different plan. And so every week, what the coach did for the coachee was to force him to have a plan, do, study, adjust cycle. It wasn't his plan, do, study, adjust cycle. It was his coachee's plan, do, study, adjust cycle. His plan, his do, his study. And all the coach did was force him to go through it and to help him get the most out of it. Now, what also happened in the background behind this was that he had his own plan, do, study, adjust. So he came in, before the Monday conversation already happened, he had a plan. He had a plan for how he was going to have his conversation, what that person needed, and how he was going to help them go forward. So you get to his do, and his do was the planned conversation with his coachee. So that's his execute. That's his go and work the plan, is how am I going to influence my coachee in that conversation? How does he examine whether that do phase worked well? Well, of course, we have to get back to study. But his study is the do phase for the coachee. While he's doing, I'm studying to see whether he's got it or not, whether I'm getting the result I expected to get. That's my examination. That's my understanding. That's how I evaluate whether I got it. And then I come back and I adjust, and we have a different conversation the next week. So these are 2 connected but separate plan, do, study, adjust cycles. One for the coachee, one for the coach. And the point is, and I'll spend a little more time on this in a bit, is that we don't coach with a known outcome. We don't coach with a known current state. We coach based on what we examine. We coach based on the need. And that's got to be our focus. So as we do that, we have to have our cycle of plan, do, study, adjust. If we come back and say, well, I have my bag of tricks, I'm going to throw my bag of tricks A, B, C, D, and work the system and work the process, and out pops the magic answer most of the time. Sure, that probably happens often, but that person has unique needs. That situation has unique requirements. And understanding the uniqueness of each coachee in each circumstance requires that we as a coach have our own learning cycle. And why this is so important is that This is why we can't coach all day, every day. Coaching is a massive investment. I think most people that put their hand up and say, yeah, I try to coach far too many people. We try to coach 20, 30, 40, 50 people. But all we can do is roll out a routine of touch points, hit them along the way, and hopefully they learn some things. I'm fine with that. I have no problem with having a routine, having a sequence of steps, taking somebody through a process. What that is teaching. Teaching is not coaching. They're both really, really valuable. Teaching, whether it's in the front of the classroom or a hallway conversation where you share some advice, or taking somebody through a process where hopefully they learn some things. Really, really valuable. But that's not this. That's not having my plan, do, study, adjust cycle for the person that I'm coaching and helping them go through their plan, do, study, adjust cycle. That requires some time. That requires some investment. And so when I'm coaching an organization, I won't commit to coaching more than 2 or 3 people at a time. I'll give advice to hundreds at a time, to 1 at a time, to as many people as you want. I have no problem standing up and talking with people and sharing some insights, some experiences, some stories, some whatever. But coaching, you better be ready to invest yourself into your own learning cycle. Plan, do, study, adjust. So I already mentioned this point of the study. Now, as a coach, how do we study the people that we're coaching? So this becomes the role of direct observation. Some of you call this going to the Gemba. I try to be, that's great for as long as everybody knows what you mean, but if you're talking to a bunch of people that don't, then use something that everybody understands, like observation. How are you going to go observe the current state? Right, this is not usually where a data pool helps you. You need to do some observation. So yesterday, for those of you that attended Sam's Plan for Every Person talk, he talked about observing 2 up and 2 down. If I want to observe one of my direct reports and how well they're leading, I can't just observe them. I have to observe their team because that's the result of their leadership. I can't just go observe a person. I can't just get them to tell me what their biggest challenge is. I need to go observe what they're doing. I was working with a leader who, every time we sat down and talked, he said, I've been for months making a specific expectation clear for my team. They never seem to get it. They never seem to do it. I've put incentives in place. I've put sticks in place. I've said, I've made it crystal clear, and every time I turn around, I'm not getting the behavior I want. So we talked about how we might articulate it. We talked about how we might reinforce it. We talked about how we might go and follow up on it. Until after the 3rd time having the same conversation, say, well, there's something here I don't understand. I don't understand why you're not getting the result. So let's go do some observation. So I went into his meeting where he was going to once again make it crystal clear exactly what his expectations are, and observed him working with his staff. And not once during a 25-minute rant and rave did he actually make the expectation clear. He covered everything. He covered why. He covered what the consequences could be, but never once did he actually make the expectation clear. Now, he couldn't see that. He came out of that conversation absolutely certain that he made it clear. But the observation told us something different. So the role of the coach is that we have to help do that observation. This is what the coach was doing for the person in the case study during that do phase. Every time he was off going and doing this do, he was observing him. He was understanding what was going on in the current state. Let me go observe you in your situation, in your context, and see what the current state really is. We have, this is kind of more for the Lean for HR track, but we had a few conversations along the way around how do we observe people before they come into the organization. If I want to get the right behaviors, how do I make sure of the right behaviors? So we have behavior-based interviewing and all sorts of things, which is still just an interview. And so we had one organization that actually would put on, and they were hiring in large numbers, so this made good economic sense, but they would run lean simulations. as part of the interviewing process. Now, what it looked like to everybody else was, well, this is who we are, this is what we're about, and we want to make sure that before you come on board, that you get what we're all about. And that was exactly what they told everybody. They would participate in these lean simulation experiences, and they would be observing the participants to see who had all the answers and who participated in a team. Who was a learner, who was a knower, who sat in the background and who rolled up their sleeves and got engaged. They observed the behaviors because it was the best way they knew to be able to understand what the real current state of this person was. So the coach has to be able to do this. They have to be able to observe as naturally as possible the current state of the person that they're coaching. So a favorite sales author of mine, he's a lean thinker without knowing it. His name's Jack Daly. He's about as vulgar as anybody I have ever met. But besides that, he has two main messages around building a sales organization, and that is culture and systems, which, without saying much more, says he's a pretty strong lean thinker right out of the gate. But he makes a very strong point about the worst thing that sales managers do. They go on sales calls with their salespeople. And what they do, the worst ones, run the sales meeting. So say, important client, want to make sure I'm better than you are, so I'm going to run the sales meeting. The okay ones observe for a little while, and then when things aren't going so well, jump in and save the day. Only the great sales managers never say a word other than to shake the client's hand and say, nice to meet you. Because their sole purpose in going on that joint sales call is to observe the salesperson. So they understand what they do not only when things are going well, but when things are going poorly. And it's the only way you can understand what's actually going on. And so those sales managers are the great ones because they observe for the sole purpose of coaching that salesperson when they're done. So direct observation, absolutely essential for the role of the coach. This also leads us to coach to the need. We train to expectations. We train based on what we want people to be able to do. We train based on the knowledge that we want to impart. We coach based on what that person needs to be successful. Now, the reason these tie together is I need to observe to understand that. If I start coaching without any observation, I have no idea what the need is. The very first experience for the subject of our case study was he just sent him off into a team and say, here's your expectation. Here's an area. Go make improvements. Here's the objective I want you to meet. It was no introduction to try these methods. There was no introduction to here's the objective of this. The sole purpose of this first iteration of improvement was I need to know what I'm working with. Go do the work. I'm going to observe you. Now, he doesn't tell you he's going to observe you. He just makes sure he has an opportunity to observe. Now he knows what the person needs. Now he can coach to what that is. Now I go create experiences that help close the gap that I've now identified. Right? Key idea of problem solving is I can't solve the problem before I know what it is. Have to define the problem, have to define the need, have to define the objective, have to define the gap before I can build a plan to close it. So Dwayne and I were talking about soccer. He knows that I'm an avid soccer fan. My very early career was cut down short by multiple knee surgeries, where I'm now an expert on a lot of things about really bad knees. But I took many years off, and then I had kids and started coaching and started playing and spend whatever free time I have, which for those that know me isn't a lot, coaching an elite travel soccer team that my oldest daughter plays for. And so I took over this team. I wasn't planning on taking over this team, but the head coach of this team quit right before the season was about to start. And I was the only one really qualified, so handed me the reins and said, here's the team. Now, this was not exactly a very good handoff. I was literally in China for the first 2 games of the season. So I was getting messages through my wife around how the game was going and what my two assistant coaches were doing in my stead. But almost the entire first season was spent understanding what the need was. Because this was a team that was fraught with issues. That first season, when I took over the team, we scored 6 goals. We won 3 games. We didn't do very well. We had a lot of kids that weren't real happy. We had many more parents that weren't happy. But now I knew what to work with. Because the team wasn't playing badly because they were bad players. They weren't fantastic players. This was by no means a team of all-stars. But they were lacking specific things that they needed to come together. One is they lacked chemistry. So what did we do? We spent a lot of time off the soccer field. We had pool parties. We went and ran a 5K together, which was the first time that anybody got me to run a 5K, and the only reason I've ever wanted to. So we went and ran a 5K together. We went and did things together, and we spent a lot of time building chemistry. We cut the parents out of the process because the parents were, as anybody that coaches a team knows, one of the biggest contributors to the problem. A lot of decisions had been made around what the parents expected. A lot of promises had been made around what the parents wanted. And so we solved that entire problem, is we completely cut them out of the process. I emailed parents, and I had no conversations with them. I said, here's the expectations. I'm going to coach the team. I'm going to set the expectations. Your job is to clap for the kids on the sidelines and keep your mouth shut. And most of them, well, I should say almost all of them, except the ones that I removed altogether from the situation, followed that direction. They needed to understand that they needed to work on the fundamentals. So we spent a lot of time just running practices where they just touched the ball many, many times. And they needed to do it in a way their practice makes permanent. And so I didn't give the captain of the team, co-captains of the team, to the best players, which had been the practice of the team. I gave the ones that had the best behaviors, the ones that exhibited the behaviors that we were asking the team to exhibit. And those were the players that got the captaincy. And perhaps my most important rule is that across that white line is that you're not allowed to talk about boys anymore. So these girls came from 4 different schools, so they all, a team that we pulled from a pretty broad area, and so it's one of the few chances they got to, so you want to talk about whatever you want to talk about before practice, that's fine. That white line, can't talk about boys anymore. Now, as a father of a daughter, if you can find a rule where we can just make that permanent, I'm fine with that. I'm welcome to any advice possible. So one of the reasons I own property is so I can find lots of burial places for any suitors. But that was my rule. We crossed that white line, and we're now about soccer. So we put these rules in place. We coached to the need. We tried to create an environment and a set of experiences where I spent very, very little time coaching them on soccer. But what I tried to do was give them experiences that helped them understand what they needed to do. In fact, most of the games at halftime, all I did was repeat the one instruction I gave them at the beginning of the game, which was always different each game, but I give them one instruction, focus on this. At halftime, I'd repeat it, and then say, talk about what you need to talk about. And I'd step back and let them go from there. The next season, we went undefeated. Gave up 3 goals the entire season. Following season, went undefeated again. And I spend most of my time just giving individual player feedback. Because this team has learned to become a team. They own the process. They own the instruction. If I do something outside the routine, they call me on it. Because now they have taken ownership over their process. But it was coaching to the need. That's not a coaching routine for what you do to coach a soccer team. That's what I did for this soccer team. So we have to understand the need before we start coaching. Now, part of the role of the coach is to get somebody to move. We need to get somebody off the dime and start letting them move forward. And one of the key ideas behind this is a concept generated by a guy named Robert Fritz called creative tension. Is we have to help them understand what the ideal state is, and we have to help them see clearly their current reality. That's our job as a coach. Help them see both of these things. So we have tension between these two things. We have tension, there's my large rubber band that hopefully doesn't break on me. We have tension between what the view of the ideal state is and what the view of current reality is. Now, tension wants to be relieved, right? The natural state wants to be relieved. And there's lots of ways we can relieve it. The easiest way, which is what most organizations and individuals do, is they do it by lowering their expectations. We don't have to be that good. One of my least favorite phrases in business is best in class. Because we spend a lot of time saying, well, what's far enough? We define exactly, well, as long as we're this far, we're fine. We don't have to go any further than that. Let's just stop there. That's best in class. Instead of saying, nope, this is what perfection looks like. Or we spend our time convincing ourselves that, oh, we're really not that bad. So we're not that bad, and we don't have to be that good. Tension relieved. Right? Now I don't have to change. The leader's job is to help people truly see current reality for what it is and have a vision of an ideal state that sets a new expectation. Now in our case study example, the two things that the coach did for the person they were coaching was, in part of the current state, was he put him into a situation where, based on the behaviors he observed, he knew he couldn't succeed. And so he went in, and his first round was a success. He saw the behaviors he knew that he didn't want to, that he wanted to adjust, put him into a different situation and said, now, go after this. And he failed. Fell flat on his face. Now we started to see his current reality a little bit more clearly. But just as importantly, he helped him see an ideal state. He took him to Toyota's best plant, a plant called Kamigo. It's basically where the Toyota production system was invented. Most people don't expect to go into one of the best engine plant in the world and start to make improvements, but that's exactly what he was expected to do. And going back to our point around the comfort zone, all he had him do, he wasn't going to say, go fix the plant. He said, go work with one operator. Go work with one person and make their process better. Oh, and by the way, that person doesn't speak English. So now work with that person and make things better. Now I'm way outside the comfort zone. I'm in an environment that is far from what I'm expected. So what did he experience from terms of ideal state? Well, he experienced two things. He was coming in as this hotshot guy from another company to be this really, really good leader that Toyota had recruited into their organization. And he had the same assignment that two frontline supervisors had. And his improvements were about a third of the accomplishment that these frontline supervisors achieved. He thought he was pretty good at the end of the first day. Oh yeah, I made all these, look at all these improvements I did. Oh, look at what they did. Wow. Okay, they far exceeded my expectations. I thought you were just setting a ridiculous expectation. Turns out it could be achieved. And better yet, he then put them in front of the plant management team. And he got to observe their behaviors being on the other side of the table. He presented his improvements to the plant management team. They asked him questions. They took detailed notes. They were highly engaged in everything he had to say. And he saw the behavior that he should be aspiring to. So they painted a picture by putting him in front, giving him an experience that said, here's what the ideal state looks like. So as a leader, our job, as a coach, our job is to help people see current reality for what it is, paint that picture of what ideal state looks like, and keep that tension. Our job is to keep that tension because what's natural is we do this. I was working with one group that went on a productivity study. They found a sort of a sister organization. They went off to go study them, and they said, here's our numbers, and here's their numbers. So they look pretty good, but you know what? There's 3 reasons that our numbers are kind of unfairly low. So really, our numbers should be up here. And oh, you know what? They have a couple advantages, and so their numbers, if you really compared them, would be down here. So you know what? We're way better than they are. So there's not so much improvement to do. They systematically built into PowerPoint this. They said, well, you really think that all of our error is to this side and all their error is to that side? Well, that's ridiculous. Right? There's some reasons for their numbers to be higher and our numbers to be lower. And at the end of the day, there's a gap. And the job of the leader, of the coach at that point, was to say, here's the gap that's in front of you. So we have to define that gap because only in tension do we want to move. Relieve the tension, there's no more reason to make change. Now, some of you have heard sessions around the value of certain methods of standard work for coaching. And so we talk about standard work as it applies to work. So what is the value of standard work? And it has many benefits that we can talk about. It's repeatable. We get the same results. It's teachable. It's, if we do it right, adjustable. We can make improvements. It's observable. All these benefits come from having standard work. And we look at this and say, oh yeah, that's fine for putting cars together. That's fine for putting medical equipment together. That's fine for running a call center. But coaching, that's way too variable. I've got this other person, they're variable. You know what mood they're going to be, what the situation's going to be, what the topic's going to be. Standard work doesn't apply. And so we convince ourselves standard work doesn't work for coaching conversations, for coaching engagements. Well, here's the failure of that logic. I already have tons of variation. I have the person, their mood, the situation, the topic. I have tons of variation. Why would I want to add more variation by not having any standards for myself? We already have enough variation to deal with. Why would I want to add more, not by having a standard? Now, where people fail in all applications of standard work is we think that standard work means rigid. Standard work does not mean rigid. Standard work means this is the target. That's not what we're trying to do. It doesn't mean we never deviate from the standard work. It means that when we deviate, we can spot the deviation. We can identify the reason for the deviation. And we can adjust either with the deviation or adjust back if we need to. So it doesn't mean that things never change. So I have had standard work for coaching conversations for 15 to 18 years. I started developing, I learned a couple standards, I evolved them over times and practiced my own plan, do, study, adjust for my own standard work. Whether you pick up Toyota Kata as a standard for coaching engagements or develop your own or copy one of the others, doesn't really care where you start as long as you improve your standard as you go. But what's important is I've had a standard for many, many years. I probably only follow my standard work in a rigid way, in a sequential way, in an A, B, C, D way, 10 to 20% of the time. People say, well, what's the value? If you're only going to do it 10 to 20% of the time, why bother having standard work? Because the rest of that time, every single time I don't follow the standard in sequence, I know where I'm off track. I know why I'm off track. I know the consequences of being off track. And I know how to adjust based on being off track. It's just like your drive home at the end of the day. You get up to an intersection, you find out there's an accident, the road's closed. Well, you're not stuck. You know how to adjust, what the consequence is, and how to get back on track. And the same thing is true of coaching conversations. The major failure in violating a standard in coaching conversations is that when someone comes up to you and starts looking for coaching, their starting point is talking about ideas. They say, here's my idea, what do you think? Well, should that be the beginning or the end of the coaching conversation? What do you think? That's the end, but they start at the beginning. Okay, that's where you started. That's what we're working with. Now, I have to spend a lot of time working my way back to the beginning, but I know exactly the consequences of where we started. I know that I'm off track. I know the consequences, and I know how to adjust. If I don't have a standard, then I'm just winging it every single time. So standard work in coaching conversations becomes absolutely essential. I want to demonstrate one aspect of this. Let me make this last point, and then I'll come back to the standard. And this is the attitude, I think, that is most important. As I said, I'm not here to just run through tools and practices of coaching. There's lots and lots of ways to learn that. But I want you to be clear about the mindset of the coach. And the point is that the coachee, the person that you are coaching, really need a better word for that than coachee, is your customer. They are your customer. They are not yours. So when we start to coach, the biggest failure that we have is that we're trying to get somebody else to do what we want them to do. That's teaching. That's manipulation. That's advocacy. That's a whole lot of other things. But that's not coaching. Coaching is helping the other person be successful based on their objectives, their vision, their views, their objectives, where they want to go. Now, we may influence and adjust where they want to go. We may try to teach and paint a picture of what good looks like and hope they commit to that same ideal state that we have for them. But if we're truly coaching someone, we're helping them be successful in their views of where they need to go. Now, if they have the wrong view, then teach them what the right view is. That's not coaching. That's teaching, advocacy, manipulation, whatever you want to call it. Coaching is helping that person be successful in their definition. Now, the worst of these circumstances, especially this happens when we're coaching up. I think probably one of the most popular questions I get is, how do I coach my boss to do X? Well, the problem is they think their coach is a lean leader failure. They don't respect their boss. They don't admire their boss. They actually don't want their boss to be successful because they believe in their boss's success. They want their boss to be successful to get out of their way and help them be successful. Then you're the customer, not them. If you have disdain, if you do not respect the person you are coaching, do not try to coach. None of you are good enough actors. If you were, you wouldn't be here. You would be the other end of the country. None of you are good enough actors to hide your disdain, to hide your lack of respect, or just not good enough. It will come out. It will come through. And ultimately, you will take shortcuts in your coaching, and you will fail. Now, if this person needs coaching, fine. Find them someone who can coach them. But you're not it. We don't get extra points for being the coach. At the end of the day, I want this person to be successful. Why doesn't matter. What's the best way to get there? Is it me as coach? Is it someone else as coach? Who cares? You don't get extra points for having to be the coach. You get extra points for getting the outcome. Someone else is better suited to be the coach in that circumstance, then make them the coach. Get them to be the person's coach. Do not coach when you cannot respect the person and their objectives, their views, their vision, their success. We have to be in this to help the other person. Every time you go into a coaching conversation, you have to check your intentions at the door. Why am I in this conversation? Here's one of the tests that you can use. A good coach will never use the word should. Never use the word should. Because the second I do, here's what you should do. Here's an idea, whatever that might be. In fact, I will never give a person I'm coaching only one idea. If they're asking for ideas at some point when we get to the process of talking about ideas, I'll never give them one idea. Because if I'm giving them one idea, I'm implying that that's the idea that they should take. Now their choice is not between here's 15 ideas and I'll decide which one I want to choose. The choice is, do I listen to my coach's idea or reject my coach's idea? It's only one choice. Never use the word should, because you're robbing them of the opportunity to make their own choice. You've just made it for them. They just get to decide whether to accept your advice or ignore it. You've made the choice for them. So we never give them the idea. Now the reason this is so important is that we can't be in that mode all the time. It's impossible. Unless that's your full-time job and that's all you have on your plate, it's almost impossible to be all about the other person all the time. It's exhausting. It's hard. It's mentally focused. And so, going back to what I said earlier, teaching is not coaching. I want you to limit the frequency of what you call coaching and expand the depth of what you mean when you do that. We can't be a coach all the time. Choose your customers carefully. Choose your opportunities carefully. And as you go forward with that, make sure that you're investing with a proper ideal of being a coach at that time. So, these are just some ideas, some concepts, some thoughts to think about as you think about coaching and your role as a coach, your relationship as a coach. I don't know if we have cards on the table for questions or if we're just going to call them out, but I think we have some time for a couple of questions. And in addition, for those, I'll be sticking around afterwards and also be in a panel discussion afterwards, so we'll have that opportunity. So, who's got a nice hard question for me? Should have said this in the beginning, and I do mean this, is if there aren't questions, I tend to call on people randomly. So just a little incentive to have a good question. Please.
Over here.
Thank you, first of all, for the wonderful presentation. My question is, so if you're coaching and you respect that person, but you get disrespect back, what do you do then?
So one of my favorite, so what happens when, if you're getting disrespect from the person you're coaching, right? And again, the point is that we have to be truly humble, not in it for the ego. And so I don't care whether the person respects me or not. I mean, I care, but not from a coaching process. I care only because I'm a human being, and my feelings matter too. So it's one of the great benefits of getting married to the woman I got married to is get a few digs and shake your ego a bit, and those things don't hurt quite as much. So we care, but we shouldn't care as a coach. We're in it for them. So who cares at some level what we're getting? Here's one of the most valuable questions that a coach never asks. Are you willing to be coached? We never ask that question. We just kind of naturally, we stealth coach. We try to slide into it. We try to come around from the side. But it's an extremely valuable question. For one, if they say yes, and many more people are willing to say yes than you would think, because there's a big difference between accepting an offer of coaching and going to ask for coaching. Going to ask for coaching requires a lot of courage. Accepting an offer of coaching only requires acknowledging the need. So one is you'll be surprised how many times people say yes. Once they do, you have some free reign. You have some degrees of freedom. You can give them assignments. You can say, here's what I'd like you to do next. Here's what I'd like you to try. So you get some degrees of freedom to treat the person in a certain way. Not disrespectfully, but in a relationship where they expect to get an assignment. If they say no, that's still useful information. If they aren't interested in being coached, that doesn't mean that you decide not to coach. You get to make your own decisions. That's the wonderful thing about freedom. Now, those things have consequences. If you ask your boss, are you willing to be coached, and they say no, and you proceed anyway, that's fine. I've done that before. It's had consequences. It led for some painful days. But it has consequences, but fine. You get to make that choice. But what's wonderful is now I know the mindset of the person. They said no. Okay, I'm going to have to adjust my approach with this person. As I create experiences for them, it's going to have to be different. I'll give you an example. I was working with a guy in a fragrance company. He was the chief perfumist. These are the people that create the fragrances. And these are, in our own little geeky verticals, the rock stars of the fragrance industry. If the chief perfumist and the CEO walk in the boardroom and say, it's him or me, sorry, Mr. CEO, but you have to go. Our chief perfumist is going to stay. And he refused to engage in any of this. And so we created an experience for this individual where he came in, we worked on a problem that he felt was important. He felt was everybody else's problem, not his. He engaged, his team engaged, he participated in the process, he helped create the process that we were trying to create. And in the end, he got to sit there and said, it's about time you guys fixed it. And he could sit there and be indignatious all he wanted, because I don't care. He exhibited the behaviors we wanted to. So depending on what we get back in the mirror from the person we're coaching, we have to adjust our approach. And the more we understand the current state of that person, the more we can adjust to that need. But that doesn't mean we ignore the opportunity. Now, is it just that they don't want coaching from me? Fine, I'll find you a different coach. Do you not want coaching at all? I have to find a different way to give you experiences. We get to make that choice, and we adjust our approach. And this is one of the times when we understand the role of a coach is not to have coaching conversations. It's to create experiences. And coaching conversations are just one tool in the toolbox. I think we have time for one more question. In the back there.
I'm on my way. Hi, thank you. This has been, you're like speaking to my life, so this is this is really great. I just wanted to mention that, and see if you have this experience as well. My colleague and I spend a lot of time talking about whether our leaders should be teachers or our leaders should be coaches, and oh, they're the same thing, and no, they're not, and no, they should be teachers, no, they should be coaches, and I just wanted to put it out there or have you comment on the people's experiences that you've worked with, when you say, would you like to be coached, that may mean something different to one person versus would you like me to teach you something? And sometimes that includes coaching with it. So if you can comment.
Yeah, so one, again, coaching is not teaching, and so what is our aspiration and our requirement for leaders in an organization? One, what is the aspirational requirement? And two, what is the short-term objective? Because absolutely, our aspiration should be every leader should be a teacher and a coach. They should be able to do both of those. Well, how far are we away from that standard? What am I going to work on for the next 24 months? Now let's build a plan for that. So a couple of things around that. One is that we have to understand the individual, meaning that the objective is not the same for every person that we're developing. Long term, absolutely. Short term, not even close. Right? Some people might all we aspire to is get them to be able to teach because they have ideas in their head, they just don't know how to get them into other people's heads. Others might be simply really good at engaging. I'll give you an example of a leader I was working with is they had great ideas. They had great vision. They had great mindset for how to think through this. But because they were an owner in the company, every time they opened their mouth, people just took everything they said as simply a directive. They didn't try to offer it that way, so what they did is they slunk to the background. They didn't want to steal everybody's opportunity to lead, so they decided to keep their mouths shut because every time they opened them, people took it as directive. But this person was really a good coach when we gave them the opportunity, so we had to develop that capability where they could be a coach and not rob people of the opportunity. So to me, leading lean, as in general, is a one heart, one mind. It's an inside-out thing. We don't have organizational change. We have people in the organization that change, and ultimately that adds up to organizational change. And when we think about our expectations for the leaders, we need to treat them the same way as well. There's not a leadership team. There's 10 people in the leadership team, and each one of them has different needs. What's our objectives for each? So when I'm engaging with a leader, we spend a lot of time defining what their short-term objectives are. I had 2 leaders that were on the same team, and we started talking about, in the category of how do you influence others, what is your specific objective? And of course, you can't have 15, so let's pick one. One was just be a role model. They didn't want to teach, they didn't want to coach, they just wanted to be a good role model. Another, his direct peer, wanted to be able to coach his boss. Completely different objectives. But it suited their needs, their styles, their willingness to reach and commit. And if they're not willing to commit, what's the point of having the objective? So we have to treat people like individuals. There's no such thing as an executive team. There's a bunch of people on an executive team, and let's treat them like the individuals that they are. So I'll stick around for the break with answer any other questions. I'll be on a panel discussion as well. You can ask more. I appreciate you all being here. If anything else you learned from this is you must go back and do something with what you learned this week. Don't go back. Put your binders away and just catch up on email. Take some action on Monday. So be safe travels home, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.